Gerhard Richter is considered to be one of the most influential painters working today. Now, for the first time in New York, the Museum of Modern Art has mounted an overview of the German artist's work. Michael Kimmelman in the New York Times says this is one of the finest, most beautiful and strangely moving exhibitions of the work of a living painter in years. It is just about pitch perfect. The exhibit, Gerhard Richter, 40 Years of Painting, was organized by Robert Storr. He is Senior Curator of Painting and Sculpture at the Museum of Modern Art. I am pleased to have him on this program. Take a look at this. This is the New York Times piece in which you see Gerhard Richter there. This was a piece written by the aforementioned Michael Kimmelman, the art critic for the New York Times. Welcome. How important is this exhibition? I mean, notwithstanding you have a point of view about this.
I think it's very important.
No, you know what I mean. I mean, give me some real sense of what it means to have Richter with this 40 years of painting on an exhibit in New York.
I think a retrospective exhibition serves many functions, and it depends a good deal on the moment that it lands and the context in which it happens. In one way, this retrospective, like many others, summarizes the career of a great artist. In this particular instance, it's an artist who is not known to the general public as well as he should be, and I think now is beginning to be. And it is not only a matter of taking stock of what he's done, remarkable paintings by themselves, but that including him now in the chronologies of post-war art means that we're going to have to move the furniture a little according to what we thought was the sort of layout of post-war art. Here's an artist, for example, who made photorealist paintings in 1962. The only other artist of that time making photorealist paintings was Richard Archwager, and neither Richter nor Archwager knew each other. So in the way we talk about photorealist painting as a phenomenon of the mid to late 60s, here suddenly we have an artist who was there much, much earlier and who did things with photo painting that nobody really had taken into full consideration.
So the context has to be, you know, a retrospective like this can help put an artist in the context of his time.
Yeah. And not just add him to it, but make us rethink what we already think about that context. That's the principal thing. That Americans have a lot of catching up to do with regards to contemporary art made outside of this country.
What's the hardest thing when you mount an exhibition like this, assuming you've already done the hard work of the acquisition of what you want to show?
Well, the acquisition and the hard part are interconnected. An exhibition, if you're writing a book, you would say, now, look, it's obvious that this is the masterpiece and this is the lesser work, and what we want to do is talk only about masterpieces. But exhibition is an experience of work, and part of what you're trying to show the members of the general public as well as the specialized, dedicated public is how an artist thinks. In which case, you don't necessarily choose only masterpieces. You sometimes choose revealing smaller works. The other thing is that you can only show so much before people's attention flags. So you have to pace it, and you have to sort of imagine the rooms in which these pictures will be seen. I, for one, use very few labels. I much prefer people to find out by looking rather than to be told by a text or what have you. But in order for that actually to function, you have to sort of bring people in, give them a sense of the pace that they're going to need, phrase the show room by room so that the cumulative knowledge of one room teaches them how to look at the next room.
Let me take a look at some of these. First one is slide we'll see. This is called Toilet Paper, 1965. We'll see these not necessarily, mostly in chronological. I'll take a look at this. What am I seeing?
If you consider Andy Warhol, for example, who painted soup cans, this is an equally banal object. But Andy Warhol's soup cans were bright and shiny and looked like they were fresh off the shelf. This is the role of toilet paper when it becomes an object of use. It's an object of commercial culture which is in a sense humanized by the actual, again, the use of it, the fact that it's already something of our world. The other thing is that its patheticness is counterbalanced by this beautiful, beautiful aura of light. And so, in one way, it's a kind of a vanitas painting, although it's an anti-vanity object, but it's a vanitas painting about the fragility of the body.
I'm going to go through these relatively fast to give the audience a chance to see the variety of them and have you just quickly sort of characterize. The next one is Administrative Building, 1964.
That's the look of Germany after the war. That's the new ugly construction that was the beginning of Germany's regeneration.
Next one, Mustang Squad, 1964.
Those are Allied airplanes flying over Germany. They were the planes that eventually dropped bombs on Dresden, where Gerhard Richter came from. And in this case, you have an artist making images of warplanes who had actually experienced the war firsthand. These are in a sense not abstract images at all. They're quite personal.
Uncle Rudy, 1965.
This is even more personal. This is Richter's own uncle, but he is in a way representative of the uncles or fathers of many Germans who went cheerfully off to war. In the case of Uncle Rudy, he was killed almost immediately, but he was an eager soldier. And therefore, this is a troubling image to deal with.
Horst and his dog, 1965.
This is another related picture. This is actually Gerhard Richter's father, who went off to war, was taken prisoner, and came back a broken man. And in this particular picture, he's sort of clowning for the camera, and this is his effort to sort of re-ingratiate himself with a society that doesn't want him.
Clouds, 1982.
This is an abstract painting which has multiple layers, one of which is actually a picture of clouds, a beautiful sort of photographic painting of clouds. And then on top of it are fragments of a geometric abstraction, and on top of that are fragments of a gestural abstraction. It's a series of 3 different paintings that don't belong together, and yet somehow they cohere.
Next one is Gall, 1983.
Well, that is, in a sense, the toilet paper the second time around.
Exactly.
It is a Vanitas painting, truly quoting the Baroque, but it's the same light.
But 20 years later.
20 years later. And thought, when he painted it, by the way, to be a totally reactionary thing on his part. Since he belonged to the avant-garde, why should an avant-garde painter paint such a traditional subject? He must, in fact, have been doing it ironically or cynically, and Gerhard is anything but cynical or ironic.
Next is Candles, 1982.
A similar kind of picture. It evokes old master painting, but it could just as well be candles on a restaurant table. In any case, it's terribly beautiful, and it gives you a sense of the fragility of things.
Next is Meadowland, 1985.
Yet again, a picture which seemed reactionary when it was painted, because it is a beautiful painting of a beautiful site. But the important thing which you lose in reproduction is that there is a kind of a film between you and the object. And so unlike the landscape painting that you're invited to walk into, this is one that basically says, I am there, but you can't reach me. It's a kind of tantalizing and frustrating treatment of this beauty.
Next is A Cell from the series October 18, 1977.
Well, this is actually the record player, which is another painting from the same cycle, and it was in the cell. This is a single object, which, in the context of the work, is sort of an enigma. In fact, it was the place where one of the prisoners was supposed to have hidden a gun with which he was supposed to have shot himself on the night of October 18, 1977. This is the end of a very agonizing series of events in German history. But here again, it's like a Vanitas painting, but it's a record player. It's a modern object. It's not a historical one.
Betty, 1998.
This is the artist's daughter, painted at the time that Richter was painting this cycle of paintings about terrorism. But the photograph was taken at the time that those events actually took place. And Richter's interest in the Baader-Meinhof group had mostly to do with the women in it, with whom he felt a strange kind of, I don't know, affinity, not with their politics, but with their emotional sense of the wrongs of the world. And in a sense, he's painting his own daughter, reflecting on the history that she inherits, and a young woman coming of age in the way that these other women had come of age and made fateful decisions.
Next is Abstract Picture, 1992.
Well, first of all, the title is significant because it doesn't say abstract painting or abstract abstraction. It's a picture, and Richter always views abstraction as having some quality of representation implicit in it. In this particular case, it was a painting which was shown with a group of gray mirrors, and in the gray mirrors you could see yourself, and you became the image of the painting in reflection. And this painting, although you can't have an actual reflection, seems to have a kind of flickering subliminal image, if you will.
Flowers, 1992.
Shown at the same time as the painting we just saw. And this is indicative of Richter. He shows bodies of work that are of 2 types at once. He doesn't give you an abstract show and then a figurative show. Yeah. He makes you deal with the irreconcilable differences between 2 conventions of painting. So next to that rather gritty, gestural painting in grays and blacks, you have this absolutely lovely, exquisite, old masterish flower painting. And again, what avant-garde painter would dare to paint flowers in this manner? Nobody.
And the next is Self-Portrait, 1996.
And this is again, an almost old master's painting, but it's not. If you consider that most of the self-portraits we have historically, the artist looks directly out at you, in part because they were looking at themselves in a mirror to paint it, and in part because they wish to establish this sort of one-to-one dialogue through the eyes and the expression. Here, Richter is not looking in a mirror. It's actually a photograph he's done it. So he's introducing a disconnect between himself and the image and between you and the image.
Some people have characterized him as a cynic.
he is absolutely not a cynic. He has a very skeptical mind. He has had a very, very rough life. And he has grown up among the most troubled times one can imagine, and in one of the most troubled countries one can imagine. But he is absolutely not a cynic. He is sort of possessed by the problem of whether to believe or not believe in things, and he, in a sense, has a philosophical nature, but he does not want to allow himself to be led to convictions that might be misleading, might be destructive, might be whatever. And
others say, as we continue to look at this exhibition, that this exhibition in ways is a reflection of his love of painting as a medium.
Yes, absolutely, and he's been written about often as if he were finishing painting off by showing that you could do it extremely well and not mean it, and that in some way he was the fifth columnist of the Dada avant-garde, using up all the available options of painting and then leaving them, sort of dead on the floor. Absolutely the opposite. He's one of the most extraordinary painters, if you want to talk about the use of the medium, we've had, and therefore all of his doubts about paintings are phrased in the language itself. He gives you something, as I said, in certain cases, and then at the same time indicates that you should put the brakes on before you completely succumb to an illusion, if it's a picture, or become completely enthralled with the thrust of a gesture on the assumption that it happened spontaneously. He wants you to say, no, wait a second, are you sure?
Yeah. All right, next one is Court Chapel as a Dresden, 2000.
Well, this is actually an interesting picture. It's taken with a very, very close friend and longtime supporter, Benjamin Bucklow, a German critic. And Bucklow is of essentially a postmodernist, socially critical point of view in ways that Richter himself is not.
Right.
And their dialogue, I think, has been one of the most important dialogues between a critic and an artist that we've ever had, partly because they disagree about so much, and yet they respect each other so much. And in this particular instance, Richter has posed the two of them, or they were posed in front of these old doors, and the picture says that it's in front of a church, which is the last place you would expect to find either one of them. In fact, it was in front of the academy. And I asked Richter about that, and he said, no, it's just as well. An academy is a church is an academy. What he's really saying is that the institutional entity behind us represents the social belief structures, and we are two people standing outside of them, but in their vicinity.
When you mount this, you want the audience who comes to MoMA. It'll be on until May 21st.
That's right.
You want them to come. So you've got a month to get there. You want them to come away with what? Other than the range of an artist's work and an appreciation and perhaps a reconsideration.
I want them to come away less sure of what they know about art than when they went in, but not mistrusting the artist.
Does that happen to a curator? He comes in less sure about art than he went in.
It happens to me all the time. And in a sense, one of the motives for doing exhibitions and working with an artist is to work through the problems you have with somebody who has gotten your attention, but who has not, in a sense, settled in your mind.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Gerhard Richter is at the Museum of Modern Art until May 21st. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much. No, that was great. You could